There was a moment deep into stoppage time when an entire nation believed it had witnessed something historic. A goal, the ball in the net, players sprinting toward the corner flag, a bench emptying onto the pitch. The kind of release that only comes after 90-plus minutes of tension, when a result that could change everything suddenly feels real. And then the flag went up. The review began, and in the space of about 90 seconds, that moment of pure joy turned into something else entirely. This is the story of what happened to Iran in the closing stages of their group stage finale against Egypt at the 2026 World Cup. But it's also the story of something much bigger than one disallowed goal. Because for Iran's players, their federation, and their supporters, this moment landed on top of weeks of frustration that had already been building since before the tournament even kicked off. So what actually happened on the pitch, and why does this particular controversy feel like the breaking point for a team that's been dealing with far more than football for weeks? Let's start with the match itself, because the drama here genuinely earns its description. Iran needed a win against Egypt to finish second in Group G. Both sides had reasons to push hard. Egypt, under head coach Hossam Hassan, needed at minimum a draw to secure their own path into the knockout stage. The match had been tight throughout, with neither side able to find a breakthrough that would settle things definitively. Then, in the 94th minute, with the clock running down and a draw looking like the inevitable outcome, Iran's number 4 found the net. The stadium reaction was immediate. Iranian players streamed toward the goal in celebration. For a few seconds, it looked like Iran had completed exactly the kind of late, dramatic turnaround that World Cups are remembered for. Then came the review. Referee Shimon Marciniak, after consulting VAR, delivered the verdict that changed everything. Number 4 of Iran scored a goal from an offside position. Final decision? Offside. The goal was ruled out. Egypt held on for a 1-1 draw, a result that sent them through to the round of 32 alongside Belgium, while Iran's hopes of finishing second in the group collapsed in that same instant. The margin involved was razor-thin. Iran's defender was deemed offside by the slightest of margins, with the goalkeeper positioned well advanced of the play at the moment the ball was played forward. World Feed commentator Conor McNamara captured the swing of emotion in real time, describing it simply as, "What drama?" while co-commentator Matt Holland noted there was nothing in the margin that determined the call either way. On the Egyptian side, the moment carried its own intensity. Head coach Hossam Hassan was reportedly seen on his knees in apparent prayer before the goal was officially ruled out, a small but telling detail of just how much hung in the balance for both teams in that 94th minute sequence. Here's where things get interesting, because this VAR decision didn't happen in a vacuum. For Iran specifically, it landed at the end of a tournament build-up that had already tested the squad in ways no other nation at this World Cup has had to deal with. Let's back up to where this all started. Iran's path to the United States for this tournament was never going to be straightforward, and the Federation knew that well before a ball was kicked. The relationship between Iran and the host nation created layers of logistical complexity that other qualified teams simply didn't face. Iran's national team ultimately had to base its World Cup training camp not on American soil, but in Mexico, shifting their entire operational setup across an international border for the duration of the tournament.
The travel restrictions imposed on the team were severe, even by the standards of a politically complicated hosting situation. Initial reports indicated the team would be permitted to enter the United States only a very short window before each of their scheduled matches, forcing the squad to cross back and forth rather than settling into any kind of normal pre-match rhythm. That's a massive disruption to anything resembling standard tournament preparation, where teams typically want days, not hours, to acclimate, train, and recover between travel and competition. There was eventually some relief on this front. On June 23, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security announced it would ease the travel restrictions specifically for Iran's national team, allowing the squad to enter the United States 2 days before their scheduled match against Egypt, an improvement compared to the stricter timeline they had been operating under for their earlier group matches. But even with that adjustment, 2 days is still a dramatically compressed preparation window compared to what other nations were able to build into their tournament schedules. This matters because rest and recovery time isn't a luxury at the highest level of football, it's a competitive necessity. Players who are managing constant border crossings, unpredictable entry timelines, and condensed preparation windows are operating with a clear disadvantage compared to opponents who can settle into one location and focus purely on tactics, recovery, and match preparation. When you're talking about margins as small as the offside call that disallowed Iran's goal against Egypt, every bit of preparation time matters. But the travel and basing situation wasn't the only friction point for Iran heading into this tournament. The Federation also reported that its official ticket allocation for the tournament had been revoked just days before the competition began, an issue that left Iranian supporters who had already finalized flights, accommodation, and travel plans suddenly unable to attend matches involving their own national team. For a fan base that had been planning for this tournament for years, having that access pulled away in the final stretch represented a significant and very public source of frustration, separate entirely from anything happening on the pitch. There were also individual visa concerns raised directly by Iranian players themselves. Forwards Mehdi Taremi and Alireza Jahanbakhsh both spoke publicly about delays and restrictions tied to entry into the United States, describing how the uncertainty created additional logistical difficulty for the squad in the lead-up to games. When players at this level are using their own voices to flag these issues, it tells you the disruption wasn't a minor inconvenience easily absorbed into the background of tournament life. It was something the squad felt directly, match after match. There's also a deeply human layer to Iran's tournament that adds real weight to everything else going on around the team. When the players arrived for their matches, they wore pins bearing the number 168, a tribute representing the number of victims from the 2026 Minab school attack back home. It's a detail that puts the football itself into a different kind of perspective, a reminder that these players were carrying something far heavier than 3 points in a group stage table while they navigated travel restrictions, ticketing issues, and now a contentious officiating decision in the final minute of their group campaign. So when the VAR call disallowed that 94th minute goal against Egypt, it didn't land as an isolated football moment for Iran. It landed on top of all of this. The accumulation of frustrations around access, travel, fairness, and basic tournament conditions created an environment where a tight offside call, the kind that happens at every World Cup and that VAR exists specifically to adjudicate, became something that felt to many inside Iran's camp like the latest entry on a much longer list. Now, it's worth pausing here on what we actually know about the call itself, because the offside decision deserves to be evaluated on its own technical merits separate from everything else surrounding Iran's tournament.
VAR offside reviews are determined using precise positional data, and officials at this level are working from frame-by-frame video analysis specifically designed to catch margins invisible to the naked eye in real time. The call against Iran's number 4 was, by every account from those watching the broadcast, an extraordinarily fine one. Both commentators on the world feed acknowledged there was barely anything separating an onside and offside position. That's exactly the kind of call VAR was introduced to handle, even when the outcome feels brutal for the team on the wrong side of the decision. This is where things become genuinely complicated for anyone trying to fairly assess what happened. The technology functioned as intended. The officiating process followed the same protocol that's been applied across every match at this tournament. And yet, the outcome arrived at the worst possible moment for a team that had already absorbed an unusually difficult set of circumstances just to be competing in the first place. This matters because it raises a broader question that extends well beyond this single match.
When a team faces compounding disadvantages, compressed preparation windows, disrupted fan support, individual visa concerns raised by their own players, does a perfectly correct officiating decision still feel different to that team and its supporters than it would to a side that experienced a smoother tournament buildup? There's no official answer to that question, and FIFA's officiating standards don't and shouldn't account for off-pitch circumstances when applying offside law. But emotionally and from a fan perspective, context shapes how decisions are received, even when the decision itself was technically sound. For Iran specifically, the result means their World Cup campaign in the group stage ends with a draw against Egypt, finishing in a position that sends them out of second place in Group G. Egypt advances to face Australia in the round of 32. For Iran's players, coaching staff, and supporters, it's an outcome that will likely be remembered less for the football itself and more for the accumulation of obstacles that defined their entire tournament experience from start to finish. The bigger picture here connects to something that's been a running theme throughout this entire World Cup. FIFA has promoted this tournament under the banner of football uniting the world, presenting it as a global symbol of connection and shared celebration. But for a number of nations, including Iran, the lived experience of actually competing has involved navigating political tension, visa uncertainty, security concerns, and logistical hurdles that other qualified teams simply haven't had to manage in the same way. Some analysts following the tournament closely have pointed to exactly this kind of disconnect, arguing that while FIFA's messaging continues to emphasize unity, the practical reality for certain federations has highlighted division and unequal access rather than erasing it. Iran's tournament, from the training camp relocation to Mexico, to the revoked ticket allocation, to the individual visa concerns raised by their own players, fits squarely into that broader pattern. What happens from here for Iranian football remains to be seen. The federation has not been shy about raising concerns publicly when it felt conditions were unfair, and there's no reason to expect that pattern to change now that the group stage has concluded under these circumstances. Whether any formal review or appeal follows the Egypt result is something that will likely develop in the days ahead. What's clear right now is that Iran leaves this World Cup with a story that extends well past one offside call. It's a story about a team that competed under conditions no other nation at this tournament had to face, that lost ticket access for its own supporters days before kickoff, that carried genuine grief from home onto the pitch, and that saw its tournament end on the finest of margins in a match it believed, for about 90 seconds, it had won. What do you think? Was the VAR call against Iran the correct decision purely on the offside law, even with everything else this team had to navigate to even be standing on that pitch? And does the broader context of a team's tournament experience change how fans should process a result like this one? Let me know in the comments. This is exactly the kind of moment that shows how much more goes into a World Cup campaign than what happens between the two 18-yard boxes. If you want to keep following how the rest of this tournament unfolds, go ahead and subscribe. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long.